popular videos on my channel are my Disney discussion videos. It's really all of the Disney videos, to be honest. And I'm just so pleased and happy that those videos are the ones that people have really responded to. And I put a lot of hard work into them and a lot of viewing hours, and it was just such a fun, rewarding project for me to do as a Disney fan, as a film fan, and just as a content creator. And it's what really got me started in this whole YouTube thing. About 2 years ago now is when I uploaded the first one, which talked about the golden era, and I thought it would be really nice to celebrate that and to just thank everyone by giving you an updated version of those early ones. When I first did these videos, I just had a really crappy video editor, and now I have a lot better one where I can actually use real film clips and more updated things. So I'm very excited to present these newer versions. I will be doing both parts of the Golden Era, the Dark Ages, and both parts of the Disney Renaissance. So it's gonna be really fun, and I hope you guys like them. So without further ado, here's the Golden Age Part 1.
Disney's Golden Era is by far Disney's most defining era. The only era of the 5 to be spearheaded by Walt Disney himself, it is the one that made the Disney brand, changing animation forever. The 13 feature films included span from 1937's Snow White to 1967's The Jungle Book. All but one of these films was released during Disney's lifetime, with the exception of The Jungle Book, in which he had a large presence in production before his death in 1966. While not all the films were commercial successes, they are all now considered beloved classics and masterpieces in animation. Without further ado, let's talk about the 13 films from which I feel are the least great to the most great. Number 13, The Sword in the Stone. I thought it was best to get this one out of the way first. Obviously, by its place, I like this one the least. Unlike the rest of the films I'll talk about, though, this is the only one I actually did not care for. I have 3 main problems with this movie. 1, the character Arthur. His characterization isn't bad, but for some reason, Disney hired 3 different voice actors to portray him, and it's painfully obvious. One scene he'll sound like a 12-year-old, the next he'll sound like a 16-year-old trying his best to sound 12. I found this really distracting. 2, the pacing is really off. Madame Mim would have been a much more effective villain if she had not been introduced only 3/4 of the way into the film. The eponymous Sword in the Stone was barely brushed upon and only really dealt with in the film's last 5 minutes, and the scenes spent with Merlin and Arthur being fish and squirrels, while cute, lasted far too long. And number 3, problems with the plot. Many of the early Disney films have very thin plots, so this is nothing new. However, they make up with the lack of central conflict by having really strong, memorable characters and beautiful animation. The Sword in the Stone has a paper-thin plot. We really do not know what the central conflict to be solved is, and the characters are not that strong. Only Merlin I found enjoyable. Even the animation isn't as impressive as previous films. I'm glad I saw this, and I do not want to go as far as to say that I think it's bad, but it definitely has some problems. Next. Number 12, Dumbo. It's kind of hard not to like Dumbo. It's very cute, innocent, and sweet. It teaches some good lessons and has some very zany animation to boot. Was I the only one freaked out by the pink elephant scene? However, I think the film was a bit lacking. Of all the Disney animated films released during this era, Dumbo is by far the most cartoony, while most of the others are more cinematic. Comparatively, the animation isn't as strong, but this is partly due to the fact that Disney had lost quite a bit of money on Pinocchio and Fantasia and needed a cheaper film to try to recoup. It's very cute and playful, and it's a very short watch, so there is nothing really to complain about. Stacked up against the other greats, though, it doesn't quite have the oomph. But it's enjoyable nonetheless. And the Black Crows? Yeah, let's not say we did, shall we? Number 11, Lady and the Tramp. I'll be honest, I liked Lady and the Tramp a lot more than I thought I would. When I recently watched it, I hadn't seen it since I was really little, so I hadn't had much nostalgia toward it. And to me, it always looked a bit silly. However, I found the film really enjoyable. While not the strongest of stories, I found the characters all very charming and the animation expertly drawn. You feel like these dogs are relatable people, not just animals. The plot's a bit thin, but instead we get enjoyable, memorable characters, beautiful, warm animation, and great songs by Peggy Lee. I do have mixed feelings about the Siamese Cat song, but that's a different discussion for a different video. Next. Number 10, 101 Dalmatians. 101 Dalmatians is an interesting movie. Firstly, it used a vastly different animation style than any of the previous films with the introduction of Xerox animation. Not only does it look different, but it feels very different from any previous film before it. There's little to no fantasy element that makes Disney so recognizable, well, except for the talking animals. Nor is there really any nostalgic feeling like there is in Lady and the Tramp. 101 Dalmatians is a very modern feeling film, even today. It's one of the only Disney animated films set in a contemporary time period, which makes it very unique. Despite it not looking or feeling like a Disney film, it sure is enjoyable. The puppies are cute, the characters are likable, and boy is Cruella de Vil a great villain. While I feel it lacks the substance of Pinocchio or Sleeping Beauty, it is an entertaining film and an easy film to watch. There's really not much to dislike about it. Number 9, Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is a weird film. When I said that most of Disney's earlier animated films had thin plots, this one takes the cake. There's absolutely no plot to this film whatsoever. It is quite literally a string of events tied together by the central character. The events barely had any effect on each other, and in the end it did not really feel like any of them mattered all that much. But you know what? That's okay. This film is supposed to feel weird and disjointed and surreal and uncomfortable. It's based on a weird, disjointed, surreal, and uncomfortable novel. This movie is less of a film and more of an odd art piece in motion. The art design is so imaginative, oddly dark, and absolutely fantastic. What makes me like this movie, which has no plot, so much more than Sword in the Stone, which has a tiny one, is that this film knew what it was doing and knew what it was trying to say, whereas Sword in the Stone just felt aimless and lost. Like the Lewis Carroll novel, this is an exploration of the mind, the imagination, and the subconscious. It's not really supposed to make sense. It's a silly, odd little movie that I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would. Number 8, Fantasia. In its day, Fantasia was a very risky and experimental film. While it didn't pay off at the box office, the film remains very important in the Disney filmography. Disney made a name for himself, combining sound and animation. His monumental short, Steamboat Willie, was the first animated short with synchronized sound. With Snow White, Disney introduced a fully produced, fully realized musical theater soundtrack to his gorgeously animated debut full-length film, seamlessly blending the songs, the plot, and the animation. In short, the marriage between music and animation is what Disney knew how to do best. Fantasia is the culmination of this. With little words, Disney made a gorgeous movie showcasing not only the power of music, but the power of animation, showing just how beautifully the two can go together. I really appreciate this film, though I cannot say I love it. Not all those 7 shorts I felt worked. Yes, they were all breathtakingly animated, but not all of them were executed well. Though there were some slow moments for me, the high moments were supremely high. The Nutcracker Suite, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and especially Night on Bald Mountain were so beautiful and entertaining, each in very different ways. I could go on and on about how exquisite those pieces were. Though I cannot guarantee everyone will enjoy this film, I think it is an essential movie for any fan of Disney, animation, or music. That's it for now. Stay tuned for part 2. Secondary lead of the show, Jesse Pinkman. Jesse is pretty much, turns out to be the victim in a lot of the circumstances that Walt puts him in. And Walt manipulates Jesse really easily into doing things that Jesse probably would not have normally done. Jesse's not a great person by any means, but there are some admirable qualities that he has. I do find that he can be brave and that he can stand up for what's right, but he's also really hot-headed and very impulsive and does things purely out of emotion a lot of the time.